Okay, so as I have mentioned last time, artists and writers and people in the creative world have been fairly substantial in terms of stepping up and making their voices heard, or at least trying to share their vision and their information, perhaps in a way that is better than a speech or a science lecture or something like that, because the arts communicate, and they communicate on what we might call a level with both the head and the heart, in ways that just a lecture can't uh, hope to accomplish, which is why when I was teaching art history, I usually told my students stories, because I found out if I just gave them a lecture with hard facts and dates and so on, it went, in one ear and out the other. If I told them a story, they got engaged. So that was very interesting to me, that storytelling was a way to really communicate information, especially to a group of people who were already creatively inclined, because, of course, a lot of my students in art history were people in the arts, or at least who had a very strong interest in the arts. Well, one person that I've known for quite some time, and I don't believe I shared with you last week when I talked about Xavier Cortada, the fact that I met him back in the 1980s when I was the director of the Thomas Center Gallery for the city of Gainesville. And I don't know if you have been down to the Thomas. How many of you been to the Thomas Center? Okay, pretty much everybody's been to the Thomas Center. And the Thomas Center is a beautiful Mediterranean mansion, historic mansion, and the grounds are immaculately manicured with formal gardens and fountains and so on, very much along the lines that were popular in that day. And so when Xavier and I talked about him coming to Gainesville and doing an installation for me as part of the Thomas Center program, he came up and I asked him what he wanted to do. He did a kind of scouting trip. And he said, how about if I take 10 by 10 feet in that formal garden and do something that is wild Florida? So I cleared it with the Thomas Center Associates, the dear genteel ladies who were watching over the historic property and so on. And they got into it. They said, sure, let's do it. Let's go for it. So I had Xavier up and I had the gardener's help, and we did a 10 by 10-foot garden, and he planted it with native vines and wildflowers. And it was beautiful. That it was kind of a shock in the midst of those formal, you know, 19th century kind of style formal gardens, to have this wild burst of color and sort of uh, rambunctious Florida plants. But it was a wonderful contrast. And people couldn't help but notice it, like, oh my God, what's that? In the middle of the garden. And it was so pretty because of the different colors, yellow and purple and so on, that people admired it, and they kind of got into the idea of the contrast and the juxtaposition. Well, Xavier has gone on to do a number of different projects that are in many ways similar to that. Um, he's a Miami-based Cuban artist who has created art at the North and South Poles and across 6 continents. His work is exhibited internationally, including sites in Bolivia, and he works mostly with installations rather than doing, say, paintings, although he does sculpture also. But his work is exhibited in Bolivia, Cyprus, the Netherlands, Northern Ireland, Panama, Scotland, South Africa, Switzerland, and Taiwan. So he has been around to these various places and done installations and public art projects, because he mostly wants to engage the public directly, not in a museum setting, but on the street where many more people are likely to see it. He's in permanent collections, however, in the Perez Art Museum, Miami, the NSU Museum of Art in Fort Lauderdale, the um, Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum, and the MDC Museum of Art and Design, among many others. He is the inaugural, first ever, artist in residence for Miami-Dade County and has received a 2023 National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine Excellence in Science Communication, and a 2022 Creative Capital Award and a 2021 National Wetlands Award from the Environmental Law Institute. Cortada received bachelor's, master's, and law degrees from the University of Miami, where he currently serves as professor of practice in the Department of Art and Art History, with secondary appointments in the School of Law and Miller School of Medicine, Department of Pediatrics. He's also a research fellow at the Princeton University Center for Migration and Development. It's a kind of interesting combination. Most recently, and I don't know if any of you saw this, I think at least one person told me they had, on September 16th, PBS NewsHour featured Xavier Cortada and his work, since he is trying to sound the alarm for the climate crisis in Miami. Art projects put a spotlight on the threat of rising sea levels. And so on CBS NewsHour, they had him as a guest, and he talked about his work and what he was trying to accomplish in terms of alerting people to the problems there. I'm going to show you a video since Xavier couldn't join us today. I think he's in Chicago right now. He was going to try, if he got back in time, to join us on Zoom for Q&A, but I'm kind of doubtful, depending on how the airlines are running and what's happening with him at home. But in any event, the video that I'm going to show you is a presentation that Cortada made at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard University in April 2024, just a couple of months ago. The Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Studies at Harvard fosters interdisciplinary research across humanities, sciences, social sciences, the arts, and professions. So I think that you'll find his lecture from Radcliffe Institute to be pretty conclusive, and will tell you a lot about the kind of work that he's doing. And we'll hope that the video works well, but we never know with these kinds of things. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hear from Xavier Cortada.
I think so. In many ways, I think it helped shape our humanity. It definitely was responsible for allowing us to build our civilization, our sense of who we are. And today it gives meaning to our lives in every way. Art is the most intimate of human experiences. And if it can make us, and if it can help us build our civilization, then I think it can help save us from ourselves, and save our society. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. I'm deeply honored to be here at the Kim and Judy Davis Dean's Lecture, and to be with you today in fellowship, and I look forward to your questions and discussions about the role of art. Art actually helped me navigate through the issue of climate change. It was the vehicle I used to explore art and to work and learn with my community to better understand the consequences, the impact that climate is having on my community. And I remember doing that specifically in Antarctica through the National Science Foundation as an Antarctic Artists and Writers Fellow. I remember being there embedded with scientists, glaciologists, who were studying the human impacts on our climate. And of course, we're sharing our meals together in the mess hall, we're interacting with one another, we're engaging in fellowship. And those scientists helped explain to me just how vulnerable we were. This is back in 2006. They shared with me samples of their research, pieces of ice from the Western Antarctic ice sheet, sea ice, right off Ross Island. And I took those pieces to McCrary Lab, a marine lab at the bottom of the station McMurdo base. And I melted them. Outside my window, there were the Transantarctic Mountains. I could see them. In front of me were the very materials that helped shape that topography. I took them and melted them on pieces of sketch paper. Just literally started melting, put some of the pigment I had brought for the paintings I was supposed to create, and watched them melt. And those paintings looked almost like satellite imagery of Antarctica, right? These blue pigments, melted ice with sediments. They were clearly made in Antarctica, with Antarctica, but they weren't about Antarctica. They were about where Antarctica was going. They were about the precursor of horrors to come to my community. This is the only place I've ever called home. This is Miami. And this is what Miami looks like with 6 feet of sea level rise. Scientists tell us that by the end of this century, if we continue business as usual, Miami will drown. It is an urgent matter. It is an existential crisis. It is the issue of our time. But in Miami, I don't see that sense of urgency the same way I don't see it in Tallahassee or Washington or at any of our COP meetings. I see a business community that is interested in its bottom line, interested in its quarterly earnings, interested on the return of investment, interested in how they are going to make their investors happy, extracting, exploiting, polluting to ensure that those investors are happy, all while ushering in the destruction of the very planet that contradicts the very happiness of those investors that they aim to please. And government isn't any better. I don't see government's responsiveness to this kind of crisis. I mean, it's literally an attack on our coastlines, on our security, on our ecosystems, on the way of life. But it's not treated with the urgency that this moment calls for. Again, politicians are elected every 2 or 4 years. They're incentivized by the actions they take in that electoral time period. But they're also influenced by big oil, the undue influence of big oil that not only clouds the way they act, but deceives the constituents who put them in office. I look at the faith community. I look at the faith community that prays about the sanctity of life, all the while our society is complicit in destroying life. And I'm not just talking about the 6th mass extinction. I'm talking about the collapse of nation states. I'm talking about chaos, climate migration. I'm talking about the famine, hunger, suffering that our fellow citizens are to endure, not just in Miami, but in every place where land touches water. And I see silence. I see silence from our faith community in face of this great unethical and immoral issue. I see silence. I look at education, at academia, hoping to find a solution there. I see us stuck in our silos. We talk about interdisciplinarity, but at the end of the day, we are driven by what funds us. At the end of the day, we're in the petty squabbles of academic politics. We look at our community as human subjects, not as people with wisdom and capacity to help us problem solve. I'm disillusioned in many ways by that. So then I look at the cultural community, hoping to find this space where we could have an openness, the very place that helped build our society, that helped shape our humanity. And I see problems there as well. I look at institutions that are ready to talk about it, but only if their donors approve. I see the back of the house not walking the walk, the front of the house maybe showing an exhibit or a dance. That is akin to the greenwashing that any big oil company would do to check off the fact that they addressed climate. I look at the most powerful tool that we have, the arts, as the solution to help bring us together, but find that too many, too often, allow its own self-preservation and interest to defy its role in preserving all of us. And I decry that self-absorbed, selfish response in face of the collapse of everything we love and care about. If we really believed that this was a climate emergency, if we really believed that billions would perish, would we not use the very tools that we use to capture and witness a moment to stop that horror from happening? Would we not use the power of art to bring us together, to convene, to reframe, to stop the catastrophe that we are sitting here trying to alarm others about? It's not just our ecologies that are collapsing. It's not just monocultures replacing the diversity of ecosystems, of old growth forests that have the medicine, that have the biology that can help prevent and cure diseases not yet found. It's not just our marine life being depleted. It's not just our ecosystems crumbling as wetlands become bulldozed, as coral reefs become bleached, but it's also our very democracies that are crumbling. It's our way of engaging and interacting with one another. And I believe that now is the time for us as a society to understand that the arts, that the power of art, that our inherent creativity can be part of that solution. In Miami, it's not just about what happens at the coastline. This is an environmental justice issue of what happens to the people of Miami. As you look at this picture, you see the menacing rising seas coming to a shoreline, but you also see skyscrapers and cranes of any coastal city. The sadness of it is that if you are someone working inland and you see the buildings going up, you assume that there's some person with wealth who has the know-how, the knowledge, the capacity to build at the water's edge. So the problem probably isn't that bad. All these environmentalists and scientists probably are engaged in a hoax. This person isn't stupid. They wouldn't be building at the water's edge. Why should I be sacrificing or voting or concerned about the issue? Not understanding that that's a completely different roulette table they're gambling with. Not understanding that the developer who's building at the water's edge gets their return as soon as the condos are sold in a year or two. Not understanding that the people buying those condos aren't buying it for their home, to embed themselves in community, to be part of the fabric that helps our community thrive. It's a third or fourth home. It's play money. And it's a good place to park your money and investment because you're going to flip that in 2 or 5 years. But society at large, the same society that's impacted because property values continue going up, because the Achilles heel of climate change and sea level rise isn't impacting the decision-making of the real estate purchases. In fact, it's helping blow up that real estate bubble. Because of that, we have this blind spot. And the people living inside in homes that are in neighborhoods that don't have the tax base of a financial district, that don't have the tax base of a tourism district, that don't have the high density, aren't
Blanca,
going to be able to adapt.
no, stay
Aren't
here.
going to be able to have pumps pumping the water out as the seas rise.
Stay on the floor.
Aren't going to be able to have their roads go higher because the money isn't there in those communities. And those communities will become the water reservoirs in the shorter term. But again, that's an invisible matter. So as an artist, I do my best to try to make those invisible things visible. And that's the reason I created The Underwater. The Underwater is a community-led climate action campaign that uses interactive art installations to reveal South Florida's elevations to rising seas, its vulnerability to rising seas, to spark climate conversations, and to urge civic engagement. I did that because I was inspired by hurricanes. Whenever there's a hurricane in Miami-Dade, everyone moves. Everything stops. You're putting up your shutters. You're going to Home Depot and buying all the plywood. Everyone's hoarding and taking the water. But everyone is mobilized. Everything stops, and all are in, looking at that 3-4 day track, seeing what's going to happen to the hurricane. Is the eye of the hurricane going to hit Miami? And even if it does, everyone knows that FEMA will protect you and the water will recede. But there's a storm that's coming called sea level rise, where the water will not recede. It will hit all land at all time, and there is no FEMA to save you. But no one's doing anything about it. So I thought, to try to let people understand that sea level rise was happening, I tried to explain to them what the scientists in Antarctica had shared with me. Of course, I had created these ice paintings. That's what I did, to raise awareness, to break through, to warn them about the problem. They were actually the literal depiction of melting ice. They were the literal depiction of what was going to be coming to your front yard. It's literally the water that was going to arrive at your doorstep. But I wanted to do something that would make the issue a little bit more personal. I wanted to find a way of bringing it to your doorstep. So I decided to take those Antarctic ice paintings and use them as the backdrop for yard signs that people would put in their front homes. I needed to make it personal to them, so using an app, I had people type in their address, and they would discover how many feet above sea level that address was, how many feet above sea level the homes were. And then they would take that number, and they would draw it on a yard sign, and have the courage to put it in their front yard. In many ways, it was Antarctica coming to town. And this wasn't a for sale sign. This wasn't a vote for me sign. This wasn't an even, keep your dog off my lawn sign. This was this sort of ambiguous sign with a number on it that made you want to do a double take, that made you want to ask, what is this number doing here? What it was an opportunity for individuals to take responsibility for something that, prior to that, they thought wasn't their issue. Well, those are the people living on the coast. Or something that they thought was someone else's problem to solve. But over here, they were the eco-emissaries. They were the ones literally telling the neighbor across the street, who was curious about what that weird blue sign in your yard was, that that sign depicted the elevation of their property, and that they should probably be interested in understanding the human impacts on climate and how our planet was warming. I used this campaign to do a series of other things. I engaged the community in problem solving by having them literally depict the elevation of several intersections across Miami-Dade County. Coupled with the thousands of yard signs and these intersections, we made sea level rise impossible to ignore. You couldn't walk around without someone seeing or talking about this sign, created by, placed by the very citizens who would be discussing what had happened. And it was an important effort because it also helped visualize some important data. People assumed that the farther away you were from the coastline, the safer you were. That kind of makes sense. Not realizing that flat Miami, our top elevation is 20 feet above sea level. That's our high elevation, unless you count the landfill, which is 10 times higher. But our highest natural elevation is 20 feet above sea level. But there's a ridge. And on the other side of the ridge, we have this thing called the River of Grass, the Florida Everglades. So by creating a series of these intersections going from east to west, we showed that initially the numbers were lower and then they would go higher. But eventually, after you hit the coastal ridge, the numbers would start diminishing. Using engaged art created by community to make it personal and to have people understand what their climate vulnerability was. This role of using art to engage folks in the making isn't just about my belief in art, but it's about having us believe in ourselves and our role in the creative problem solving. In fact, the most important aspect of this project was the convenings. We created the nation's first underwater homeowners association, where we would host community meetings, right? Not talking about the paint color of your house or how tall your grass is, but it's literally talking about the issues of what's going to happen when groundwater is high, what's going to happen to our septic tanks, what's going to happen to insurance rates, what happens to our tax base and our property values, right? Trying to bring in experts and having conversations between experts and community leaders to talk about and discuss the future, a future with rising seas. And when COVID hit, we pivoted and we started having our meetings on Zoom. I don't know if you remember back then, but you would create these little panels in the background for Zoom, right? Back in the day, it was a big novelty. So we had people create their own panels of their own elevation so that whenever they would be on a Zoom call, someone would ask, what's that number 8 behind you? And to me, it's this process of engaged creativity where we encourage collective action through the art making, where we believe in people's own ability to understand. We have enough faith in individuals that if they understand their vulnerability, that they will do something about it, prompted us to create all sorts of interventions. Some of them were outside museums, others of them at art fairs, where we would have large-scale installations. On the upper right, it's our latest installation during Art Basel Week, right at the water's edge, 5 feet above sea level, next to one of the art fairs under a pretty tent. Inside the art fair, you have art selling for $300,000. Outside the art fair, you have a sign making art democratic and accessible, showing people the very vulnerability of the barrier island upon which Miami Beach was built and having us have a better understanding of it. In all of these activities, there's always a conversation, always a convening, always an invitation for people to come together and learn more and learn from one another, learning together and working together. And then we innovate. In this case, when we do our canvassing, it isn't going door to door to knock on the door to have people vote for someone. In this case, it's going door to door and having people understand what their elevation is. The yard sign we ask you to put up isn't one about a political candidate, but it's about your own climate vulnerability. In many ways, I believe that it is imperative for us to be able to do this not just in cultural spaces, but I think we need to bring that into our educational arenas too. I think we need to look at education from a foundational phase and look at the real world challenges that middle school students are going to inherit by the time they get to be my age. And I think that socially engaged art projects like the ones I've just described to you create spaces for purpose-driven experiential learning, ultimately cultivating individuals with holistic, ecologically aware worldviews, and instilling foundational learning skills such as curiosity and self-efficacy. I went back to my alma mater, Miami High, Miami's first school, 40 years after I graduated, and I decided to bring the underwater to them. Miami High has had a bunch of iterations. When I was there, it was dubbed Havana High, because most of us were kids of Cuban refugees. Then it was Managua High and Tegucigalpa High. Through the years, it's sort of that conveyor belt / incubator that brings Latin America into Miami and allows the enclave that has been built there to support different immigrant groups as they make their way into the American dream. And I went back there and I brought the project to them. And we started by trying to pique their curiosity. We asked them to put yard signs everywhere talking about, what is your number? And at first it was a small group of students we worked with, sort of like the leaders of the group, who put these signs, and the kids had no idea what it was about. They thought it was about their cell number, so they started putting their cell numbers in the posters. But what we did is we engaged them in this process, right? Making it weird enough so that they would do a double take, so they'd be curious about it, so they'd be intrigued. And then we engaged every single science student, 2,000 students in that class, with a 90-minute session. That wasn't just about talking about climate. I did this through my foundation. The Cortada Foundation is here, and you'll learn more about it in the signs you'll get, where we not only told them about the issue of climate, but made them the protagonist and the emissaries and the people who would find out about their elevation, but then take those markers, all 2,000 of them, and put them all over Little Havana and plant them in their community. They were the experts on their block about climate. And they had this conspicuous blue sign so that when Abuelita came over and asked, what's that number 10 doing in our front lawn, they would be able to talk about climate change to Abuelita, or to the neighbor across the street, or to their parents. They were able to convey what they had learned collectively and as part of an art project, something bigger than the traditional. And one of my proudest moments as a practitioner was this. This was the students from Miami High who took the initiative to get some shopping carts, load them with yard signs, and go up and down Calle Ocho, up and down the Merchant Avenue where the bodegas are, up and down 8th Street where no one talks about climate. And they went from merchant to merchant, telling them about what they had learned, and asking those merchants in the middle of Little Havana to put signs about climate in their doors. And they were able to do this because this wasn't an ideological issue. This wasn't the political campaign. These were their grandchildren. These are their merchants, right? These are, the people who would buy from them, coming to their doors and saying, look, this is an issue and we want you to put a sign up. So using art as a vehicle to disarm, to connect, to build a sense of community is what we did in a place that didn't even want to have a conversation about climate. In my view, I'm trying to use art to create a platform or a process that creates a cadre of creative, empathetic, science-literate problem solvers who, with empathy and love for community, are given the skills early on to be able to tackle our greatest challenges. I see art as liberator. I see art as having a role that can reawaken our human spirit, that can give a sense of purpose again, and that can help us again understand what it means to be human in a time where we walk away from a problem because we think it's too daunting. You know, when a kid, this has happened to me so many times, like a parent comes and shows me a little drawing that their child has made. It's a beautiful drawing. And they look at it and saying, this will be worth something someday. Like there's incredible value to the drawing as commodity, as look at what my child can produce, instead of understanding the real value there, that some 8-year-old had the ability to use some crayons and a piece of paper to imagine something beautiful and different, to be creative. instead of worrying so much about the tangible object that was made and whether or not this kid's going to be an art star, how awesome we were to value the ability, the creativity of that child to problem solve, to see things differently, to bring different pieces and people together to address issues. And they're going to need to, because every single kid in this Broward County school, the county just north of Miami, faces this future. I don't want them to be concerned about art as commodity. I want them to understand that art is about connection, which is why we delivered 1,000 of these yard signs across 10 of these Broward schools, and through my foundation created murals in every school depicting the elevation of that school. And by marshaling these 100 students that we worked with directly in every school, had the ability to have every single kid in that school know the elevation of their school, something that no one knows about. Please understand that no one understands or cares about elevation or sea level rise or climate, because all you have to do is go on Zillow and see how property values are twice what they were just a few years ago. No one's understanding the threat to climate. But if you can begin to use art to show that, and you can find other creative ways of working across institutions to communicate those ideas, or to serve as a catalyst for action in this way, in this particular way, the Broward County effort is something that's funded through not just the Department of Resiliency and a local community foundation, but art in public places. The folks who deliver the objects that usually are permanent, through this initiative, partnered to create process art, community-engaged art, eco-art, art that would address the future of Broward County, to create that cadre of citizens. And again, using art as a place to convene, to bring people together, I have another project that I created, in this case, to try to inspire a polluter so big that if they were a country, they'd be the third largest polluter. And I'm talking about the concrete industry, responsible for about 8% of the carbon in the atmosphere, because they have to use a lot of energy to produce to produce concrete that is pure and isn't going to have the steel corrode. But over here, we're creating these elevation markers made out of sustainable concrete with fiberglass instead of metal rebar, so the impurities can stay. We actually make it with salt water. But importantly, through art, we're giving a platform for the concrete industry to be able to showcase this innovative way of making concrete across 287 parks in Miami-Dade County. So the important thing is that we're incentivizing an industry to find some climate solutions by using the creativity of art to showcase that. And clearly, to reach out to people across all stretches, particularly that western fringe of Miami-Dade County, where they may not be aware of their vulnerability, that they are indeed susceptible to sea level rise. In fact, it is through these installations that someone tossing a ball with their kid at a park can happen upon this weird thing with a number 10 on it, and using a QR code, understand that their park is at 10 feet above sea level rise, but also find out their home's elevation and understand their climate vulnerability too. They also become areas for placemaking. We usually have a ritualistic process where we invite people to it. In this case, a park in South Dade, we invited some elderly citizens who shared their collective wisdom. These are people who struggled during the civil rights era to keep their communities intact and are now suffering from climate gentrification because their community is just a little higher at 9 feet above sea level. And they're wondering why all these condos are being built next to their homes. Well, through art, we could inspire them, these elderly seniors coming to a senior center, to use the skills that they have built through their lives to once again fight for their neighborhood, to once again have a sense, to have the dignity and the respect of someone with wisdom and power to be able to communicate ideas and help save their society. And that's the power, that's the value that art brings to these conversations.
Blah.
And in every one of them, there's always a way of having different layers. When you put a yard sign in your house, or when you see a bus going by, or when you go to one of these parks, there's a QR code that prompts you to find out your elevation. So anyone, without ever meeting me, you can go there and type your yard sign, type your address, and there's places where you can come and get your yard sign, or there's even ways of you creating your own. And then importantly, we ask you to begin to take action. Again, if you know that sea levels will rise up to 7 feet by the end of the century if we do nothing, and you just discovered that your home is at 5 feet above sea level, the home that you're working every day on so that your daughter can inherit it, wouldn't you write your state representative and say, "Hi, scientists tell us that sea levels will rise by 7 feet at the end of the century. My home sits at 5 feet. What are you doing about it?" I mean, if it was that personal, if it really impacted the thing that you value the most, that has the most worth, and the person you love the most, your progeny, you'd act. And that's what we do with these projects, where we try to have people understand their climate vulnerability and then give them tools where they can not just contact an elected official, but then, with their curiosity peaked, learn more and get involved. We give them local groups that they can volunteer with, and then we even have an intel section where they can learn more about the project. To me, art has an incredible role of breaking down barriers and bridging divides and giving people a sense of agency. So all of a sudden, you're not just understanding the issue, but you're advocating and being part of the solution. And of course, it's important for me to break across the spectacle that society has created that normalizes all of the pollution and climate disruption that exists. So I try my best to also work with mass media to communicate these ideas so that the broader society understands. And sometimes I do bizarre things, like go to the 54 coastal city halls across a peninsula, a state whose boundaries are shaped by water, and put yard signs in front of those city halls, the very place where they do land regulation, the very place where they decide what they're going to do with their tax base. And I put yard signs warning people about the elevation of that city hall, asking the people who sit on that dais to take those issues into account as they deliberate on whether or not to build housing on a place that a
You
hurricane
can't go in there. No,
destroyed a decade
no,
earlier.
Blanca.
Something that obviously Ian witnessed in the very path of Charlie. All of these are processes to help build an engaged citizenry that isn't deceived, that isn't duped, that isn't polarized across issues that wedge and divide us. And I believe in
No
the
which
ability
way
of
to go.
art to
Let's
do
put
that.
this
I
way.
believe in our ability to understand our shared vulnerability and convey it to one another, just as I did during one of those COP meetings when I wanted us to
This way.
understand
Come on,
that
baby.
retreating to our sense of selfish survivalism was a deplorable way to express our humanity. And you see nation states do that when they talk about, well, unless they do this, we won't do that, thinking that the artificial boundaries that we create on a map somehow respect what carbon and climate will do to the people living in those spaces. Over here at COP, I wanted people representing their nations not to think about the interests of their nation states, but instead of to think about the humanity and to think about the impact and what they could do at Glasgow to address the issue of climate. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Today I'm inviting you to create your own very yard sign, to make a yard sign by taking your phone out and scanning that code. that'll take you to the location where you can put your elevation, your home address. Now, I understand that I'm in Boston, and some of you are coastal, but some of you live a little bit upland, and some of you even higher upland. So not all of you are going to have that elevation. For those of you who live higher than 100 feet, the number that you get is going to ask you to move your decimal 2 points. So
Oh, okay.
it should be pretty
We have to
obvious
go this
you
way.
if you're at 103 feet.
Yeah, we were going.
And then there's going to be some markers going around, and I'm just asking you to find a way to just mark those markers the same way that I have the students mark it. I ask them to bring their creativity to the conversation, to put a little bit of themselves in those markers. I know some of you are going to be at 200 or 100 feet, and even as you write that, just to raise that awareness, to understand that there are parts of this community that are vulnerable, and that something as simple as putting a yard sign in front of your house to pique curiosity, to spark conversations,
Blanca,
and to be a catalyst for people to respond would be important.
stay
If you
over
happen
here.
to be part of institutions that have a little bit more
Okay, come here.
capacity, look at
Okay,
something
sit.
as simple as
Sit.
this as
Thank you.
an approach that you
Stay
can
there.
take to addressing this issue of creative problem solving.
Blanca, look here. No, no, stay. Ah,
Most people don't respond because they fear that it's not their problem. That lack of empathy is something we try to tackle. Others don't respond because they think the problem is too big and someone else will take care of it, either technology down the future or government. And others do care and understand the problem is big, but don't think that they have anything to do with it. And what I create to these processes is a platform that gives you the agency so that you yourself can be part of the solution. There needs to be a shift, I think, from passive consumption
no,
to cultural
no.
production. There needs to be a time where we just can't numb ourselves by binging on Netflix and lull ourselves into thinking that things are fine as an escape instead of moving forward and proactively trying to solve an issue. I think that what we do or fail to do today is going to echo through time. It's going to echo through history. And I believe that artists can lead us and help us find the courage to break through, the courage to lead, the courage to speak, the courage to act. But I don't want to stifle what it means to be an artist or to put it in a box or to limit it. Art isn't only about expression. It's not a tool to express ourselves. Art is a weapon. It is a weapon against apathy, and it is a weapon against despair. And we in society, all of us in society, we're born with that weapon. Some of us have been conditioned. We are scared to use it because that's what artists do, and we're not artists. We need to liberate art. We need to free ourselves. And we need to use the tool that made us who we are to save us from what we're becoming. It could not be more dire than it is now. Billions will suffer And the thing that gives me hope are my favorite species, human beings, if they use their full potential. And that potential includes the creativity that they use to create the paths of their lives, to create what they do with their beings, with their time on this planet. I just want them to use that creativity to create a better life for all of us. Thank you very much. Just really quickly, I'd love to be able to see all those yard signs come up a second, see what those numbers are. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Turn you up a little bit.
Hi, this is Xavier. Greetings.
Keep talking.
Okay, no, I'm happy to be welcomed. I just wanted to make sure you knew I was here. But hello.
Hold on. I'm trying to get you turned up here. Hold on. I went the other way. Hold on.
Sure.
Okay, we're at 90 now. Okay. Talk, say something.
Hi, this is Xavier. I'm so happy to be here with you. I'll wait. I'm following your lead before I start speaking. I'm just trying to say hello to the audience before we get started. Mallory, I cannot hear you if you are asking me a question. I can't hear a thing.
Is this on?
There we go. Finally.
Oh, you can hear me.
Okay.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
so delighted that you can join us. This is wonderful. I
Sure,
told the audience that I wasn't sure where you were, whether you would be home in time.
I
But
have been traveling a lot. I've been out most of September. It's October and I'm finally
and
home.
congratulations on your PBS NewsHour appearance. I think that was wonderful.
Thank you.
Really helping to broaden the audience here. So, okay, I think we have. Do we have any questions on Zoom there, or you're asking to put them? How about in the audience? Do we have some questions here?
First of
Okay.
all, just who's in the audience? How many individuals do we have? I mean, I'd like to say a quick hello. Give me a sense of who's in the audience. I can't see.
Well, okay,
I
we
can't
have
see
a
you
small
guys.
group this morning because one of the main reasons is that we had, a little hurricane that blew through,
Yep.
and a lot of people still don't have power, and
Okay.
the roads are still, in some cases, especially out in the country, clogged with trees and brush. So
Sure.
we're kind of limited in number today, but
Okay.
we also have a lot of those people that couldn't get in person are here on Zoom.
Okay.
So.
Well, just as a quick intro or hello before the Q&A, if you would, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to connect with you. I know that most of you have, like me, spent a minute or two on this planet. We're all, a little senior. And I just want to let you know how inspiring it is that we're still at it. We're still learning. We're still thriving. We're still wanting to grow because knowledge is it's a lifelong pursuit. And Mallory, I'm so honored that you oversee this class and that you've invited me to participate. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll
I
start.
have a question.
Go ahead, Dale.
I just wanted to say this video, this presentation is like a, a revelation. Look what happened last week. Everything he said occurred. I have friends in Asheville, never dreamed that the hurricane would affect them in Tennessee. Almost verbatim what he has said happened. Some of them didn't believe it. They didn't think it would come that far. And then hundreds of people probably are dead out of ignorance. And I tell you, everything you have said, I wish the world could see this presentation that we just saw. It is right on target. That's in the most simplistic way I can say it.
Thank you, Dale. And as you saw in my presentation, what I try to do is give you a platform to amplify your voice. Dale, your neighbor across the street, even with the information that is playing right now on ABC News, your neighbor across the street would still vote against her own interests, would still ignore the issue. But by having someone like you, someone that she knows, you can have a conversation where those things that she's a little bit insecure about or uncertain about can be, talked about with a trusted person. And if we can in America just begin to understand who we are at our core, that we are all people who share a lot of common ground, instead of looking at what divides us and polarizes us, as we're seeing in American politics today. So through art, as I was ending that conversation, through art, I think we can tap into our own way of expressing our own creativity, but also through art, we can open the door to let someone else who may otherwise ignore this issue come in and have that conversation. And as I said, halfway through that presentation, we need to act now. The hurricane we just saw, I mean, that hurricane was nothing off the coast, at the bottom of the Gulf, and in no time it sped up. And look at the damage it is bringing. And hurricanes, as I said, will only be stronger. They will be wetter, more flooding, like what killed everyone. And they will churn. They will sit and bring about the kind of destruction that we saw in the Bahamas. And unless we act now to decrease the amount of carbon pollution that we put in the atmosphere, that carbon is going to trap heat, warmer waters, and give these hurricanes all the fuel they need to continue this destruction. We need to understand that connection. So thank you, Dale.
Yeah, I'm just glad I was on here to watch this, because you presented the evidence before it happened. For me, last week was the evidence of what you were talking about in the video. And so it can't be denied, because there's so many of my friends up in that area. They are crying all over the place, those who can. Some they don't, of course, as you know, if you follow the weather report, they don't know how many people may be dead, but all the water and the flooding out and everything. That's the evidence right there. I mean, you presented a case before it actually happened. And if people can't wake up to that, then we got real serious problems in this country and world.
Yep. And
thank you so much.
Sure. As you know, Dale, it's the poor and also the elderly who suffer first and suffer most. So it also talks to us as a people. Like, if we know that there is danger coming, what are we doing to diminish that danger? And so it talks about us as a people, how we act or fail to act. Thanks so much. I think Phyllis had a question.
I wanted to thank you for a brilliant approach to informing and involving a community of people. Here in the Gainesville area, we're at 75 to 100 feet above sea level, so that number approach doesn't work, but I have two friends who are moving to the coast. Two neighbor friends who are moving to the coast. One is moving to Fort Myers. The other is moving to the East Coast. And when we questioned that, she said, well, we have boats. And so we bought a place on the water because we want to have access to our boats. And we said, well, what about the storms? And she said, oh, the hurricanes only go to the west coast of Florida.
Well,
it's like, and these are people, the rumor around the neighborhood is that they're Trump supporters, and therefore I presume they're climate deniers. So, and the amazing thing is that her husband is an engineer. You'd think he would know better, but it's very strange. And I just think that your approach is absolutely brilliant. If you come up with anything for those of us who live at 100 feet above sea level, please let us know. I will definitely have that yard sign in front of my house.
Well, thanks, Phyllis. There's actually a project called Native Flags where you plant a tree um, in front of your home with a green flag. And just like the sign would make your neighbor question what the sign is and you would talk about sea level, the green flag makes you talk about the importance of trees in sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. In other words, in helping reduce the greenhouse gases. So that project, if you go to cortada.com, you'll see under projects, it's called Native Flags. It's just another approach. And again, the idea here is that we care, we care about your two neighbors. I mean, we love them. We may disagree with them when it comes to the ballot box, but we want no harm, and we want them to be better. By planting trees in Gainesville, we do our part to protect Daytona Beach. We do our part to reduce it, even if it's smaller. But the bigger part I want is for us to engage those two neighbors in conversation so that when it's time to elect a new governor, when it's time to elect a senator in a few weeks, when it's time to elect a president, among all the other things that we're discussing, that climate be one of the issues that we ask our candidates about and vote on. And again, the more we can try to stand in the shoes of these individuals that are blind to climate and see what it is that puts blinders on them, I think the better prepared we're going to be to solve the problem. We're it's a situation where it is so dangerous for us to continue doing business as usual. And I am trying to use art to let those who disagree with me come into a conversation so I can show them some reason, engage them, have them understand that we're talking about their children, we're talking about their futures, we're talking about their health.
Yeah.
I haven't even begun talking about the other issues with climate that impact us all, including heat. Heat is a killer. And that doesn't happen in 20 years. That happens this summer, that can literally kill us with heat stroke. There's the
Here,
vectors
I've got
of
a couple of questions from the audience here. Let
sure.
me have them have their chance here.
I'll be more short. I won't be as long-winded in the next answer.
Come and see us when you get back to Florida. Um, I I ran a science school, partly ecology in North Miami Beach for disadvantaged kids, and with FIU, helped them get through college. And we did a lot of wild stuff like this. And I'm partly an artist and partly a PhD in ecology. So they used to accuse me of bringing art into the classroom, but we did all kinds of fun things.
How
And
wonderful. What
and
school was that? What school was that in Miami Beach? Where were you at?
it was North Miami Beach. It was the Beam Magnet program. I ran for 14 years till they decided it was, they didn't want to put any money back in it. So, but anyway, I work with the library here, and kids, and I could see us, we're not separate from the coast. I mean,
Yeah.
you had that on the coast, but we're not separate from the coast. And people have to realize here, there's been a lot of flooding around here, and you can't go up the road because it's flooded, so you may be high enough. I happen to be at the highest point in Alachua County, having been married to an architect, but we could be an island, and not be able to get out and go anywhere. So yes, the heat was incredible, and maybe we can make up signs for the heat instead of the height, and something like that. How hot was it at your house, and how did it affect you, and the hurricane it was caused by? So maybe we just pull something else out and do some more art with that.
Sounds like you're the perfect leader for this. I know Mallory and I have collaborated in art projects together over the years, but the most inspiring thing that could happen from this conversation, as I was saying in my speech, is for each of you to tap into your own creativity and come up with your own idea of how you could use all these years of wisdom and experience. And let me just try to inspire you for a second, please. You are trusted and beloved. Like you have serious wisdom to share. Like I was working with those elderly in ghouls. There's stuff that you can do in your community that can transcend politics and can have people listen. So if you could think of a project, imagine you're back at your magnet school and do it at your library and work with your community to address these issues. I think that'd be a spectacular thing. I really do. And you know, the tax base of Florida depends on the coastlines as much as what's happening in Gainesville. So it behooves the people of Gainesville to have coastlines that are not eroded or being pummeled by hurricanes.
Xavier, I cannot, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hear me? Okay.
yes, yes.
I can't tell you how much this program meant to me this morning. This morning, my son, he had stopped overnight from Atlanta area and he's headed toward Longboat Key. He has at the moment 3 feet of water in his condo. And I owned that condo before he did. And I want to tell you, it's the first time that's ever happened. I wish he could have heard your talk today because he doesn't have as strong a feeling as I do about climate change. John Englander sounded the alarm right about the time that Al Gore was working on it. And are you familiar with John Englander's work?
I'm not, but I will now.
Well, he's a sea level rise expert also, and he's been to the Arctic and Antarctic. And he also has made me very aware that sea level rise is going to continue for the next 100 years, no matter 200 years, maybe, no matter what we do. But because of the strength of the storms and all that, there are many things we can do. And I just feel very inspired by what you have presented today. Thank you.
Your son will listen to you more than anyone else. So try to, as he's down in Longboat Key, have him understand. I think the problem with our climate movement is that it has been so partisan, so politicized that we forget the common sense behind it. As he's standing there in what was 3 feet of water that is now receding, let him know that in years to come, that water will not recede after the storm leaves. That's the problem with sea level rise. That condo will be permanently at 3 and then 4 feet below, and it'll be worthless. So we as Miamians, as people from Tampa Bay, as people from Gainesville, all of us have to come together as Floridians to figure out how it is that we're going to adapt. Because you're absolutely right. Your friend is right and you are right. It is cooked. There it is. I'm trying to lessen the suffering, but even if we were to abruptly stop our addiction to fossil fuels today, sea levels will continue rising because it's already cooked, it's already in the water, the warming is already begun. But we can lessen that. Instead of having 8 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century, we could have 4. We could have more time to transition, to move upland, to figure out how we build new economies, new communities, and help ecologies. And that is what empathetic citizens do for their country and their countrymen. And I think if you and your son can begin to have those conversations about a love of country, love of community, love of the planet, I think we're going to be a better nation. I really
do. I applaud what you're doing. I think that you should put emphasis on what makes you a great artist, is the fact that you can articulate very well what you're trying to express. And I think we need to talk about the art of conversation. Absolutely. The ability to articulate our feelings in a way that other people can empathize or sympathize with the issues. And I think that's the real power of what you do. You found a vehicle to open up a conversation, 100%. But you enhance it with the art of conversation. And I think you should put as much emphasis on the art of conversation as you do on the visual art itself.
What's your name?
Stuart Basevsky.
Stuart, I agree with you completely. In fact, my art, I call my art social practice, and it's really about engaging people. It's called socially engaged art. the least important thing for me is the aesthetics. So yes, I spent all my time focused on finding ways of bringing people together. That's exactly what I try to do. Thank you for noticing.
This is Barbara Rothstein again. I just wanted one quick thing that I've been poking everybody with since all this happened is that Clay Electric, which a lot of us have, um, our electric comes from Crystal River, and they couldn't even get. They had to bring in helicopters and giant cranes because it took everything out. So we're a very little peninsula, and we're very much attached to the coast.
Yeah. It's one Florida. It absolutely is.
Okay, one thing that I first of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you, Xavier, for making the time and being able to join us. One thing that you have emphasized that I think is really, really important, and that is community. I think if we can build community instead of just all sort of suffering on our own and saying, oh, well, there's just me, I don't know what I can do about it. If we come together with the intent to try to do something, there's power in numbers. There's power in intent and in, building the kind of community where these kinds of things can not only be discussed, but then concerted, concentrated action can be taken. Okay, I'd just like to leave you with that thought. And anybody else have anything they want to add or? Okay, I guess we have it for today then.
Well,
Thank
Mallory,
you.
I want to personally thank you for your decades of being a cultural leader here in the state of Florida. Yeah, your curating was inspiring. I still remember coming over and doing the show with you over in Gainesville, and I just thank you for doing this now and for the leadership and bringing speakers and me as an artist to come speak to you. I just want to leave with the idea that there is so much we can do, and I know we're all, looking at retirement or, this sort of new phase in our lives. And I'm just saying there's no time to rest. There's too much work to do. So let's take all the wisdom and experience that we have, and let's use the art of conversation and persuasion to reach out to those who disagree with us, and let's try to engage them. We have elections coming up and we have grandchildren to inspire. Let's do this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing. All right, folks, thank you. And we will see you